Chapter 25 Hide and Thief. Kahiri had called it the castle, but it didn't look like a place for kings or queens. If each of the rooms on this floor had the same high windows, they probably also had the same chains, and maybe even the same etched tally marks. Castle seemed like too soft a word for a place where everything looked heavy and dangerous. Corinne was pulled from her thoughts by the sharp snap of Buki's fingers. "That's it, brother," he said. "Brilliant." He rubbed Malik's curly hair. Then he turned to the girls. "It's going to take all of us. Your speed, Drew, and your climbing skills, Corinne. We're going to make them split up and leave Ma Destiny by herself. She doesn't think we can get the stone from her if she can feel it all the time on her body," he grinned. "She's so sure that it will almost be too easy to take." "How?" Corinne asked. "Never ask a master his secrets," Buki said. "All you have to do is not get caught." Buki brought them to the drawing he and Malik had made in the sand and explained. "There's Ulysses." "Thank you, Ulysses." When he was finished, Malik bolted from the room. He opened another door all the way, letting it creak loud and long. Just as Buki had predicted, Ma Dessely and the two men came to investigate. One of the men came with Ma Dessely down the staircase nearest to the children, and the other ran to the stairs on the other side of the courtyard. They were going to surround them. Corinne came out of the room and climbed the wall, putting her feet into the cracks until she reached the window slits, and then pushing herself up to the next level where Ma Dessely and the men had been moments before. There, she picked up a handful of gravel and tossed it at Ma Dessely, and each of the men to distract them long enough for Drew and Buki to run off in different directions. Corinne gaped so long at Drew's speed that she didn't notice one of the men running toward her until he was at the top of the stairs. She tossed the rest of the stones at him. He skidded and grabbed the railing to keep from falling, giving Corinne time to slip inside an open room and hide beneath an old wooden desk. She heard the scrape of the man's shoes on the sand-covered floor and his hard, gasping breath as he looked into the room, but he moved on quickly. As soon as she was sure he was gone, Corinne got up to look around. Unlike on the level below, the windows here were low enough for anyone to see into or out of. Corinne closed the broken shutters, blotting out the sun except for a few shards of light. There was no other furniture besides the heavy desk. Corinne traced her finger over the top. There was a round hole on the right and a smooth groove just deep enough to fit her finger, running nearly the full width of the desk. Corinne pulled the desk's drawers. They stuck, but she rocked them open. Her father often oiled the wooden surfaces in their house to make sure that they didn't bow and bend with age and exposure to the damp sea air. No one had been taking care of the furniture here. The drawers were musty and empty. Corinne listened for footsteps and moved to another room where she found a large bed frame, a stool, a smaller desk, and a peeling leather trunk. She looked inside the trunk and found a torn, yellowed cloth with the remnants of a pattern that reminded her of the vendor's clothes. Blocky pyramids lay on a background of stripes of varying widths. She felt the paperiness of it between her fingers and smelled it. It had a sweet scent like faded perfume. It was still in her hands when Ma Dessely walked in, taking up nearly the entire doorway, blocking out what little light there was. "Where are your snakes now?" she bellowed. Ma Dessely sneered at Corinne as the two men dragged her friends into the room. Ma Dessely barked an order, and the men stood outside the door like guards. "My boys," Ma Dessely said. "They're good boys. They always do what I ask them to." Beads of sweat glistened on her dark face. She shifted the strap of the bag with her thumb. There was a dark red imprint where the thin fabric had dug down into her flesh. "I want to know where you come from," Ma Dessely asked. "How do you know about Mamiwata and the opal when you don't speak the language and you are not dressed like anyone here?" She used a handkerchief to wipe her forehead. "Well?" "What is this place?" Corinne asked. I am asking the questions, miss. Kahiri said this was a castle, but it doesn't look like a castle. Ma Destiny lowered onto the stool. It creaked under her. All right, yes. The people who built this place called it the castle. But it's a prison, Buki said. Not exactly, Ma Destiny said. Her bulk had somehow changed. She seemed softer, as though her muscles and bones had all relaxed. Her head drooped. The people who built this weren't from here. They came to capture people, and then they put them on ships to be sold across the ocean as slaves. Corinne felt the surroundings closing in, as if everything and everyone in it had become tighter. But not everyone survived the trip, Drew said. True. We saw one of the ships, Corinne said. It wasn't that far out from here. There were chains on it like the ones we saw in the rooms downstairs. She stepped forward. There was this. She pulled out the coin from the wreckage. Ma Destiny perked up. She held the coin to a shaft of sunlight. She waved for the children to come closer. You see here? She pointed at the image etched into the coin. 2 doves with the ocean in the middle. That's for loved ones on either side of the water. But it's not a coin. She flipped it to the underside, which was blank. There would have been a handle here. It's a seal, used to close letters. Tell me how you found it. Corinne didn't know if she could trust Ma Destiny, but Ma Destiny had no reason to trust Corinne either. She had introduced herself with a lie. Maybe it was time to tell the truth. 4 mermaids brought us across the ocean to get the stone from you. Corinne felt Ma Destiny's muscles vibrate like a pulled string. She looked at Corinne intently, and her hand slid down to the stone in her bag. Here, Drew said. She put a large greenish fish scale into Ma Destely's hand, one of Ellie's. Ma Destely examined the scale like she did the coin. You have seen Mami Wata then? She asked. Corinne shifted from one foot to the other. She wasn't exactly sure whether Mama Delo and Mami Wata were the same. She sent us for that, she said, pointing at the bag. Corinne figured if she didn't specify which she meant, whatever Ma Destiny assumed was not her fault. Ma Destiny plucked the stone from the bag. It was perfectly round and gleamed, in the reddish light of the setting sun. Corinne clutched her mama's stone against her heart. It looks like someone scooped out a piece of the sea, Drew said. The opal was clear at the surface, but it looked like waving seaweed and colorful pieces of coral had been trapped in the middle. Corinne reached out to touch the jewel, expecting the finger to go through it, like it was a large drop of water, but it was solid. Ma Destiny turned the stone in her hand, making the shapes in the middle look like they were swaying in a gentle tide. Why did she send you? Ma Destiny asked. Corinne told her about the missing children and the favor they had to perform. She didn't mention how terrifying Mama Delo was, or how she had given them no choice and no warning. She made it seem like Mama Delo was kind, more like Mami Wata might have been. So you believe us now? Corinne asked. Ma Destiny stood up. I believe you. Corinne let out a breath that she didn't know she had been holding in. She put her palm up, waiting for Ma Destiny to drop the stone into it. But Ma Destiny moved to the door. Come, she said. The children and the men followed her down to the lowest level of the castle. They faced the water and watched as the sun dove toward it like a red ball. It cast a bloody light over the walls, the cannons, and the ammunition. Behind them were the rooms with the chains. Mami Wata saved those girls, Ma Destiny said. And she saved my family, too. The opal has been with us for 8 generations, she said. It was the last time anyone saw Mami Wata walking on this shore. Maybe right after that, she took those girls across the ocean with her and left this behind. Ma Destiny hefted the stone in her hand. She gave it to my ancestor and told her to keep it with her always. It was a gift, she said. It would keep her family safe. And she was right. It did. But only our family. We were safe while others weren't. Families were torn apart, split across the ocean. But our family was protected, and people hated us for it. They said my ancestors should have tried to save others. They called them cruel and worse things too. When Mummy Wata gave this to us, it was a blessing and a burden. Ma Dessalee nodded, and her sons came up behind the children and opened a grate in the floor of the courtyard. Ma Dessalee's fingers closed over the stone as if they might crush it to dust. "I'm not giving it to you," she said. "But our friends," Drew said. "What about us here?" Ma Dessalee said. "Mame Huata left the stone to my family, so my family would be safe from harm, and we would be prosperous. She left it so we would never have to fear losing our loved ones to this place or watch them cross the ocean, never to return. For generations we have been doing well, and this evil place has had no use. Why would I give it up now for some children? How many children do you imagine were already lost across the water?" "It's not yours to keep," Corinne said. "She wants it back." Ma Dessalee laughed. She dropped the jewel into the bag and readjusted the strap against her shoulder. Buki and Malik rushed at her. She swatted them away, but Malik kept pulling at the bag as Buki tried to defend his brother. Her sons picked them off their mother like fruit off a tree. "You can't do this," Corinne said. "We came all this way." Ma Dessalee's sons grabbed her and Drew as well and shoved all four of them into the room beneath the courtyard and closed the iron grate on top of it. The children bounced down the stairs and landed in darkness. Corinne immediately ran back up the stairs and pushed against the metal grid. It didn't budge. Ma Dessalee fixed her head tie and smoothed her dress. Then she walked grandly out of the castle. She never even looked back.